What if the greatest threat to your ministry isn't opposition from outside, but infection from within? Organizations, including churches, rarely collapse overnight. They weaken slowly. Vision fades, unity fractures, and often the root is unhealthy leadership. The truth is this: every leader is vulnerable. No title, gifting, or years of experience make us immune. In fact, the more influence you carry, the more subtle the dangers become. There are hidden diseases that can quietly grow in a leader's heart. Pride disguised as confidence, control masked as responsibility, rivalry dressed up as excellence. In his address to the leaders of the Roman Curia, these are the cardinals and senior officials, the late Pope Francis identified different leadership diseases that can destroy any organization. He used the human body as an example, stating that once a disease attacks the body, it must be treated to prevent it from spreading to other parts. Thanks to Gary Hamel, who translated the Pope's speech, we are going to discuss this topic in 3 parts. In this video, we are going to examine some of these diseases that can damage your ministry. More importantly, we are going to talk about how to guard our hearts and lead in a way that honors Christ. Because healthy churches require healthy leaders. Let's begin. So let's reiterate, there are 15 leadership diseases, but in this video, we want to focus on 5. So let's start with the first one, the disease of indispensability. This is where the leader wants to be the center of attention. They want to take center stage. They want to take the shine. For example, they want to make sure that they are the ones that preach in all services. I know leaders who have been in church for 20 to 25 years, but they have to preach every Sunday. Nobody else is good enough. They give this impression that ministry cannot exist without them, and that is wrong. It's that is telling us that you are surrounded by so many followers and very few leaders. Because if you invest in leaders, there should be people around who can step in and take some of this responsibility while you take a back seat. So there's this feeling of superiority. I am the best. That's what these sort of leaders carry around, the air that they carry around. Again, this group of leaders tend to avoid checking. What do I mean by checking? Regular meetings. Once in a while, you hold meetings with your senior leadership team, you hold meetings or catch up with your congregation just to see whether there are gaps or areas where things can be improved. That's what I mean by checking. Some leadership audits. How well are we doing? What are the gaps that we have here? If not, it leads to narcissistic behavior. But there are solutions. What are those solutions? To engage in regular self-evaluation and continuous development. Remember, we are not looking for perfect leaders. They do not exist. However, we owe it to ourselves to improve and enhance our performance. Leadership is not a destination. It is a journey. It is a process. So there's need for ongoing development, and that is where continuous improvement comes in. We need to look at your role again as a leader in the church. Your role is to serve. I know this doesn't go down well for a lot of people depending on the culture, but your role as a leader in the church is to serve. This is where humility comes in. Humility is the key here. The disease of worldly profit and exhibitionism. Now, this is where manipulation, oppression, intimidation takes place from the leader's side, and then from the followers, they are completely unguarded. The misguided zeal, the enthusiasm, the excitement allows room for manipulation. And what this means is that the leader then uses their platform, their power, to exploit and take advantage of any material gain through ministry. They seek status and praise. These leaders seek status and praise. They focus on expanding their platform. For example, they want to take any invitation to preach in other places and sell more books. So that is their focus. The whole idea of shepherding the flock is not too much of their priority. It says this disease does a great harm because it leads people to justify the use of any means to maintain their goal. So they are attached to status. They like symbols to represent who they are. And then it's leadership that is motivated by gain. What is the solution? Serve without being seen. You can still serve behind the scene. Limit self-promotion and focus on people, not your platform. The disease of idolizing superiors. This happens in secular organizations, but it's even more worrying when you see it in church. It creates a very unhealthy environment because it's like a movement, it's like a cult-like movement. You have this personality cult, and it can lead to unhealthy dependence because you are looking up to a man instead of looking up to God. In fact, the leader is seen in a godlike manner. Leads to blind loyalty. The leader is surrounded by people who want to be like the leader, so they tend to copy the leader. As you can see in the image, there is a smaller version of the real leader, and that is what you find. Everybody wants to sound like the leader, they want to dress like the leader, so it's just a following. It can be quite intimidating in some of this environment anyway. So what happened there is that we shift away from honor to worshiping a leader, and it can be quite dangerous. There's blind loyalty. It doesn't matter what the leader is doing, everybody is happy. It means you're surrounded with a lot of yes men and yes women. The Pope has the particular description for this group of people. He says they are small-minded persons, unhappy and inspired only by their own lethal selfishness. That is quite powerful. Now, what is the solution? Be genuine with your leader. Honor them, but do not worship them. Now, I think it's Hebrews 13:17 talks about honoring your leader, respecting your leader. 1 Thessalonians 5:12-14 also highlight the importance of respecting and honoring your leader. Do not worship them. And you as a leader, try not to encourage this kind of environment where people depend on you, where people worship you. You are not modern day Nebuchadnezzar. The disease of excessive busyness. This you can see in some churches where they have services and they have events, they have activities from Monday to Sunday. I'm not talking about the regular period of time when they have fasting and people have to go to church or activities on a daily basis over a short period of time. I'm talking about the entire year there's an activity in church. Now, when you as a leader are involved in all these activities, what time do you have for that intimacy with God? Again, you tend to create a lot of stress and agitation. If you are demonstrating or showing this kind of busyness in the church, then you are actually putting pressure on younger followers, people around you. They have to live that life, they have to do it, and it means they have to ignore other aspects of life. Their jobs, their family becomes, areas that they try and plug it into church, and it is wrong. Non-stop programs. Stop and check, is this program actually helping people to develop? Are they developing spiritually, or is just a series of activities that goes on and on? Now, I've deliberately put in two images there. One to show the person actually busy, and the other complete burnout. And pastoral burnout is actually a real issue. There are statistics to show that the percentage of pastoral burnout is actually on the increase. So it's time for us we need to start talking about this. And what is the solution? Maintain a balanced work-home life, and then to make sure that you have enough rest and take time out for leisure. It's not a crime. It's not an offense to take a break. Again, burnout rate, as I mentioned earlier, is on the increase amongst pastors and clergy. The disease of existential schizophrenia. This is when the mask comes on and off. So it's about maintaining double standards. So you find in church the leader is humble, but in privately at home, they are more or less a tyrants. I'm sure you can think of some other examples. So the leader has this false persona, the public self and the private self. And this is where, like I said, they tend to mask up. It's about hypocrisy and false appearances. What is the solution? Just be authentic. Okay, now we've taken a look at 5 diseases. But what are the causes of these diseases? Uncrucified ego, insecurity, pride, greed, lack of boundaries, misuse of power, accountability gaps, and leadership without spiritual formation. So these are some of the reasons. I'm sure you can add more to that list. So feel free to come up with your own list of things that may have contributed to this extreme behavior amongst leaders. Reflection points. You see, reflection is a key part of our development as human beings. In fact, it's even more crucial for leaders to pause. I keep using the word pause. Sometimes you've got to press that button, pause, and reflect on how far you have come, areas where you think you're doing well, your weaknesses, and then think of how you can, improve. Now, some questions you can ask yourself is, which of these diseases am I most vulnerable to? This is a question I ask myself. Remember, I'm not a pastor, but I believe there are areas that we need to work on as individuals. Another question is to do with, do you have somebody around who has permission to correct you? Because if you don't have anybody around to correct you, you are in trouble. It means that you're surrounded by yes men and yes women, and that in itself is dangerous. Is my leadership producing Christ-likeness? What leadership behaviors are we modeling for our congregation? Where do we see signs of rivalry? Because within ministry in the church, there can be rivalry. Where do we see burnout or isolation? How can we cultivate a culture of encouragement and accountability? Again, a big part missing in churches. What practical steps can we take to embody servant leadership more fully? How can we ensure our leadership reflects Jesus more than institutional habits? Examine yourself. 2 Corinthians 13:5 says, examine yourself. I think it's just an opportunity to take stock of your leadership, more or less an inventory of how you lead. This is a great opportunity and a great time for us to do that. This list of diseases that the Pope identified is a great spiritual diagnostic tool. Now think about it. He used the human body as the analogy, as an example, that when a disease attacks the body, treat it or else it spreads across. What he's saying here is that as a leader, you carry a lot of influence, and if you have all these diseases around, it will spread across the organization, and that becomes the culture. Now, how does this help us in terms of looking at the church itself? It will help you build a culture of humility. It will help build a healthier leadership culture, prevent the abuse of power, restore credibility, refocus on mission and service. Authentic leadership becomes the norm. Authentic leadership and servant leadership becomes the norm. And finally, it helps to identify the pitfalls and helps the leaders as well to create a culture, an environment that can foster spiritual growth. I hope you found this video useful. Which of these diseases have you noticed either in your church or in your secular environments? Can you think of any solution? Can you add more solution to rectify these problems in your own environment? Please feel free to drop your comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more content on spiritual leadership. Thank you so much for watching.